Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of Big Sound Small Town, the podcast that spotlights the talented and diverse musicians in small towns and communities. This season we're branching out to include the community of people who make it possible for musicians to be able to perform their music, the producers, the recording engineers, the venue owners, and many others, and as always, the small town musicians. Remember, small town doesn't mean small talent. Hear their stories.
Tell me how you feeling one more time. 4 long years and I just can't believe that I'm still yours and you're still mine. While I was gone, yes, I fell in love. After I heard that you did too. 2 drunken years and push came to shove. I met love left me blue. Your rising like the sun that pulled the curtain on the night, coming through the window to brighten up my life. And I'm alright, yeah, I think Devil loves to make my baby cry while I am running wild out in the night. Devil loves to dirty up the sweet and peaceful dreams. Oh, the devil loves to make my baby cry. The devil loves to make my baby worry while I am lost in selfishness and hurry. From one blunder to another, she's my children's mother. Oh, the devil loves to make my baby worry. Threw him out of heaven because he was too strong. Although he knows the difference, he can't do right for wrong. He's of the darkness, she's of the light. I think it's time that I start staying home with her at night.
Today, Big Sound Small Town is coming to you from the Earl Scruggs Center in Shelby, North Carolina. And my guest is a true living North Carolina music icon, music manager and independent record label owner, Dolphus Ramseur. Welcome to the show, Dolph.
Well, thanks for the kind and flattering introduction. I really appreciate it, and glad to be here.
Well, now, you're a record label owner.
Yes.
I spent my life being a musician, but my childhood dream was to do that. Now, where are you from?
Well, I was born in Concord, and I grew up in Cabarrus County. I grew up in Concord, but on, it would be labeled the Odell community of Cabarrus County, which is sort of as close to Davison as it is to Concord.
Okay. Well, now, was that a dream of yours as a child?
Well, I still am, and I always have been, just a music fan. So when I got to college, I don't know why I thought this, but I wanted to go work for a record label. Because I studied music, not at college. I would study music as far as like reading every single book and magazine, history of music. I would get a magazine called Goldmine magazine. I think I'm not sure if that's still in publication, but it was really a record collector kind of publication. And I was always collecting records and fascinated by not just music from around the world, but from here in the Piedmont and from North Carolina. I realized then that, you grow up in a certain area and you kind of have teen angst come out and you want a dog where you're from. Like, I'm living in this cotton mill town and it's got all these negative things about it. But I was smart enough to realize what great musical heritage North Carolina has and still does. And so I guess in a roundabout way, when I was in college and I wanted to work for a record label, I just, it was, that's sort of where the dream, I'd sent some resumes out and never heard back from anybody. And, but yeah, that was kind of a dream for me, sure.
But then you still live in Cabarrus County?
Yes, well, up to about 4 months ago, I moved where I'm living in Iredell County, but I'm actually just a few miles. I'm actually a few miles from the Cabarrus, Mecklenburg, and a few miles from Davison, North Carolina. So yes, I'm still very closely.
So where I'm driving this to is, how does it happen that there is a record label, not only a record label, but a record company there that is not, I mean, your artists are huge. How does that happen?
So I knew a guy named Ken Linker from Concord. Ken ran a thing called the Ken Linker Variety Showcase. And in getting to know Ken would always tell me, stay out of Nashville. You'll find more crooks in Nashville than you will at Alcatraz, which,
it's true. Well, it's true.
So I just always decided if I did start it, I would stay in North Carolina. It's home for me. I grew up and I know maybe I could have been better served to go to New York City, LA, or Nashville, but North Carolina is home, and I guess with the internet the way it is, you can kind of work really anywhere. Plus, again, North Carolina is just so great when it comes to music.
It is.
So I'm in a hotbed of talent, and to me, it just, people always want to say, well, tobacco and cotton are North Carolina's greatest exports, or ACC basketball, or NASCAR, but it's music.
It is music.
By a long shot. The greatest impact we've made from the state of North Carolina has made on this world is music.
It is. I live in a town that has actually embraced the music scene, the ones who have done well and the ones who are still here playing. So it is. I mean, that's the best thing that North Carolina has to offer.
Yeah, and always has. And if you look back, I mean, just this county we're in.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the Mount Rushmore of roots, acoustic, folk music, whatever you want to call it, label it, Earl Scruggs is on one of the four on the Mount Rushmore. Not far from here, going up the mountain, is Doc Watson.
True.
He would be one of he would be on the Mount Rushmore. When you talk about jazz in North Carolina, John Coltrane is he's on the Mount Rushmore of jazz. Thelonious Monk could be questionable. Some people would put him up there.
I would put him up there.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah. So, we've it's not just roots music that's popular here in North Carolina. It's from gospel to beach music to R&B to soul, country music. It's when you're a poor state, I've always felt people look inward to entertain themselves, and I think that maybe has something to do with it.
Well, you know, there's poverty and oppression will make for good songs, that's for sure.
Well, that's true too. Definitely. And you know, we're a melting pot of sorts with the Scots and Irish, and the African Americans here. You mix that all together, and sparks can happen in a positive way. And then we're a very religious, spiritual state, and that gives people a platform to start singing in the church when you're little. So you get that experience of getting up on stage, not stage, but getting in front of a congregation, and so it all, we're just this is like a perfect sort of incubator to happen. So
there were some of us lucky enough to, Tommy Gerald, who's a fantastic fiddler, who were lucky enough to go and learn a lot just at his feet. He was a very genuine person who would show you how to play anything you could play.
Yeah, and a lot of guys like Tommy, they were blue-collar workers. It necessarily, music was not their, it wasn't their first thing. People had jobs, and then they did music second. And I think still to this day, you'll find some great musicians that have never even been on a stage here in North Carolina. I mean, they might play organ or piano at a church, but other than that, they're playing in their living room. And when I was growing up, a lot of families, especially in the Piedmont, I would think around North Carolina, would have a piano in the living room, and they would have one family member that could play the piano and get everybody around together and everybody sing.
That's the way it was in my house.
Yeah.
My grandmother, I mean, she was a fantastic piano player.
Yeah, my grandmother played Church of God style piano, so her left hand was very boogie-woogie, kind of a jump style with her left hand, and could really get rocking.
Yeah, I don't know, it was kind of the same way. So, which is really strange because there was Presbyterian ministers all in that family, and they did not let her play at church, being Presbyterians.
That's funny.
So that's okay. So tell me about deciding. Okay, I'm going to. Is that what you did first? Was decide you were putting together a record company, or did you go into like artist management first?
Well, first of all, there's an artist from England named Martin Stevenson. And Martin was on Capitol Records here in the United States back in the late 80s. And he was on London Records in Europe. So he was on major labels.
Right.
And I was a fan of his. He had a band called Martin Stevenson and the Dainties. So on his first record, how I found out about him is, in addition to liking roots music, I really love a lot of punk rock and post-punk music. Well, he was cut from that cloth of post-punk, but he had a track called Tribute to the late Reverend Gary Davis.
Yeah.
So I'm a massive Piedmont blues fan, and Reverend Gary Davis was from South Carolina, played a lot in North Carolina, but then moved to Harlem. So I became a fan of Martin's in the 80s. And then in around 1999, Martin had gone from being on major labels to where he was on independent labels. Well, I reached out to him, and he noticed I was from North Carolina. He wrote me a note saying how much he loved music from this region.
Yeah.
So one thing led to another, and I just had the idea, why don't you come over to North Carolina? And I didn't know what I was doing, and I still don't know what I'm doing. But I said, why don't you come over to North Carolina and I'll take you on a tour, kind of a musical journey.
Right.
I didn't know one musician. So
That's great.
I reached out to some local musicians. I reached out to David Holt.
Yeah.
Reached out to Etta Baker. And all these people were just welcoming, sure, y'all come and we'll.
That's great.
And so that's kind of how it all started, is bringing Martin Stevenson over and having taken him kind of on a little musical tour of North Carolina.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I realized then that musicians need help.
They do. They really do. Yeah. The musicians are great at being musicians.
Yes. So, yeah, and so one thing led to another. During that trip, and this was in July of 2000.
Okay.
I met David Childers. Somehow, I met David. Martin and I went to go. I actually had a show where Martin had a show where he opened up for David. And it was at the Double Door Inn in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is no longer there.
Great venue.
But David sang all these songs about salvation and damnation and redemption, and it really moved me. And I sent David, this is before I sent David like a handwritten letter, told him that I wanted to work with him, wanted to produce a record by him. Well, he sends me a letter back saying, let's do it. So I was off to the races, and that's kind of had just started snowballing. I was helping Martin still and helping David, and then that led to then David and my mother around the same time, this is a couple years later, a year and a half, tell me, there's a band from Concord. My mom had seen an article about the Avett Brothers. David told me they were from Kannapolis. And, being from Concord, Kannapolis it's kind of like Concord, Kannapolis, and Gastonia are all fighting to see who's in last place.
I'm glad you're the one that said that. Yeah.
So, but then I later found out they were from Concord, and that was a big was a big relief. Kind of funny how just growing up where I grew up, it's such a funny thing about Concord and Kannapolis. To this day, kids I grew up with, it's the weirdest thing how it's us versus them.
It's Shelby, Kings Mountain.
Yeah.
For local people.
It's funny how and we're all the same, so it's kind of a funny thing. But anyway, that led me, David and my mother telling me about the Avett Brothers. I went to go see them, and then I started not long after that working with them.
And they were totally different, I guess, when you saw them at that point than where they are now, right?
Well, in some ways they're exactly the same. They have grown artistically.
I think I did a show that they were on one time where they were almost punk.
Yeah, it was very raw and pure, and they were finding their way. I was finding my way, and it was, to me it feels the same in a lot of ways.
Do you remember the first record that you did, period? The very first one when you decided you was going to do it? Was this Martin or David?
Yeah, Martin. So when Martin came over, we recorded a thing called The Haint of the Budded Rose, because Martin and I, we loved Charlie Poole.
Yeah, I understand.
So we went on this thing where we recorded David Holt and Etta Baker, and David Childers was a part of it. A lot of great musicians. Great. There's a finger picker from Concord, North Carolina, named Jim Brown. That there's a couple things by Jim on that record that are, astounding. Nice. He was that good. He played with he played with Tommy Fell and George Hamilton IV, and really great guy too. He was friends with Ken Linker. That's how I found out about Jim. But a lot of musicians, there's a guy named Kirk Sutphin, who's like the best old-time fiddler in the world. He's from Walkertown, North Carolina, was on that record. So that was the first project. Then that led me to a project by David Childers called Blessed in an Unusual Way, where we took a lot of these spiritual type songs. I mean, it's not a gospel record by any means, but it just has to me, growing up here in the Piedmont, I've always been fascinated by religion. It's so heavy here, and I'm fascinated by it.
It is a fascinating thing.
Yeah, and there's all forms of it here in the Piedmont. It can go from AME Zion, like an African American church, to a Church of God, where it's a white congregation, and if nobody's ever been in a Church of God, it can be as rocking. I mean, the church can be, it can be moving in a way that you just cannot comprehend.
I can certainly testify to that.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the greatest musicians in the world, but I learned at an early age, my dad would always say, I would rather have someone put all of their heart and soul in it than someone that's got all the talent in the world and not put the heart and soul in it.
Sure.
So we kind of mixed, it was sort of a mixture. That record, it just sort of, it takes you kind of on a journey of spiritual. It's still, to me, a great little gem of a record, and I'm proud of it. And that led to other projects, but those were the first two things that got me started. But as a kid, it wasn't me playing the music, but I would make mixtapes all the time, and I mean, that sort of was an art form in a way.
I mean, I guess that leads to the producing part of it. Is that how you learned to do that, actually?
Well, I mean, I made hundreds of mixtapes and would make them for girlfriends.
Sure.
And, then I would tape. People kind of forget about taping songs off the radio.
Oh, yeah, I did that.
That was an art form in itself, to try to get a song you loved
where sound decent.
Sound decent, and then not have the DJ talking all over it. And you had to get a little lucky, had to time it right. And yeah.
Did you know these were Roger Ebert's dying words? Did you know these were Roger Ebert's dying words? It's all an elaborate hoax. It's all an elaborate hoax. He looked ever peaceful, looked ever young, accepting his moment.
All right, I'm back with Dolph on a rainy day in the Royal Scruggs Center, and we've gotten off on Piedmont Blues.
So talking earlier about mixtapes, I would record, it's like every Friday night. When I grew up, there was a show, UNCC, the college in Charlotte, WFAE would broadcast a Piedmont Blues show on Friday nights. And that was, I would not miss that. I would not go to high school football games when I was in high school, just to stay at home and tape it. And so I got really, as a little kid, I was just fascinated by Piedmont Blues, primarily because the guitar playing in it, this ragtime style where it's, mainly those men and women were just doing thumb and forefinger. They weren't doing like Earl Scruggs style. It was, and you would think it's kind of primitive with just your thumb and forefinger, but it's amazing how much sound they could get out of one instrument all at the same time, playing the bass part, playing the melody part. And that really kind of came about because they realized quickly that they didn't need a bass player.
True.
They could save money if they played a juke joint or they played a supper or any kind of paying gig. They wouldn't need another musician because they could make such a full sound. But I really, really loved the Piedmont Blues in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. I got to but I got to meet John Jackson. He was from Virginia. He was actually a grave digger.
Yeah, that's a great story in itself.
But he was a grave digger for his career, but he was a musician.
Right. And
he was a great Piedmont Blues guitarist, great banjo player as well. But he told me a story because I was asking him about all these players, and he got to know lone Jesse Fuller. And Jesse Fuller wrote a famous song called the San Francisco Bay Blues. And he was known as a one-man band. And he would have all these instruments all around him, stomping on drums and playing harmonica, bells, whistles, everything. And John Jackson told me that how that all got started is Jesse Fuller, his nephew, was dying. Little nephew, little kid. So he built a coffin for him. Well, lo and behold, his nephew did not die. So he was left with this box, a coffin. He made that was his first, in addition to his guitar, that was his first extra instrument. That was his drum. He made that a drum.
That's great. Yeah, I love that story.
That's how it all started for Jesse Fuller on this one-man band. And that's what he was known for. Then he told me another thing where Blind Blake had a song called The West Coast Blues. It's a ragtime piece. And I know this doesn't sound that special, but we're talking about 100 years ago.
Sure.
The West Coast to Blind Blake was not the West Coast of the United States. He was in Florida area. That was the West Coast of Florida. So it's sort of amazing how most of these Piedmont Blues acts never travel more than 25, 50 miles their whole life. They never were exposed to a lot of other musicians. Elizabeth Cotton from the Chapel Hill area, she played the guitar with the treble string on top.
She did.
The bass string on bottom, not knowing that. So it's, and all of them had certain little different styles about their playing that always fascinated me. And
one of the things that fascinated me about those people too is we're playing on instruments that would be low-end music instruments.
No doubt.
I mean, they're not out there
Yes.
playing on high-end
No.
musical
No.
instruments.
No, and I remember reading where a lot of times if they had a screen door, they sometimes would weave the screen and make that guitar string. But I know, and when you have Piedmont Blues is kind of famous for having all these blind musicians.
Yeah, they are.
And when you stop and think about it, here in the South, the reason they were, there's so many blind musicians in the Piedmont Blues is because they could not work in the fields. So they were giving something that they could pass the time away during the day while everybody was working in the field. So, that's why there's so many blind musicians in the Piedmont Blues.
That stands to reason, because one of my early deals was I played guitar with a blind accordion player.
Wow.
Who sit out in front of grocery stores, and of course it got me in a big trouble. He told me, he said, if you put some glasses on, pretend like you're blind too, we'll make a lot more money. So of course I did. And then my dad comes walking across the parking lot, and I said, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble now. And I was, and he was kind of on me pretty hard, and the store manager comes out and says, you're beating a blind kid, you're beating him. And the police come, he's not blind.
That's funny.
So, but I learned to play harmonica from a guy, Obie Dowell, who was a Piedmont, almost homeless blues guy, who could make a harmonica last forever. He could repair them. He would shave it. He used the wood insert ones, and they would raise up. He'd shave them down. Then they'd go down too low. I mean, he just worked it around. But I learned a lot of stuff from him too.
Well, Piedmont Blues, the reason I really loved it is because it's not repetitive like the Delta Blues or Chicago Blues, and there's gospel influence, there's working man songs, there's ragtime things, there are all these.
And Gary Davis type stuff is not easy to play.
No, I mean,
a lot of syncopation, a lot of
unbelievable. I mean, really great stuff. And then when you look at old time music, you'll find that the Piedmont Blues and old time, they're trading a lot of songs back and forth. And what you hear, like Going Down the Road Feeling Bad, done in a Piedmont blues style versus old time, and it's all the same.
It is.
And to me, that was a beautiful thing to see, the intermingling of art there. And I would discover, here's somebody doing this. Well, I knew that song because I knew that off this Piedmont Blues record.
Right.
And those are little kind of great discoveries. But I love old time music as well. Bluegrass. I like bluegrass. I love old time.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way.
Old time really never gets old to me. My best friend growing up, his great-grandfather was J.E. Maynard.
Yeah.
And so J.E. Maynard and his Crazy Mountaineers, he was originally from Buncombe County, but as a kid, he moved to Concord, Cabarrus County to work in the cotton mill. Him and his brother Wade Maynard, who predated Earl on the banjo, Wade played a two-finger style, banjo style. They worked at Gibson Mill Plant 6 in Concord for Cannon Mills with my grandfather. My grandfather was born in 1900, and J.E. was born a little bit late 1800s. So they all worked together at that mill before they got a deal. J.E. and Wade Maynard got a deal with WBT Radio to do a weekly, or maybe even a daily show. So I got to meet J.E. Here's one story I'll tell you, and I always thought this was fascinating, but I got to meet J.E. Maynard's wife, so my best friend's great-grandmother.
Okay.
Sweetest lady. I mean, she was in her 90s when I got to know her. And I got to spend some time with her on numerous occasions because she lived, I don't know, she lived 5 miles from me growing up, if that. She lived on Poplar Tent Road in Concord. So if you're ever going down 85, Interstate 85, you'll see a Poplar Tent exit, and she lived down that road. And when I would go there, they had this little shop beside the house, and there would be all these parts of fiddles and everything laying out. J.E. had died in like 1971, so a long time ago. So this is 84, 85, 86 when I got to know her.
Right.
And she told me that J.E., because I've seen a picture of this, he had a show in Columbia, South Carolina, a radio show.
Okay.
And that would have been in the 40s at some point. Well, to get from Concord to Columbia, South Carolina at that time, before interstates, you know, it was not an all-day affair, but it would have probably been a good 5-hour trip. He would play at lunchtime, and she would tune in. And I've seen this photo where, from that radio show, he had like 14,000 letters.
Wow.
People kind of forget the power of radio before TV. So a lot of people in the Piedmont, not in the 40s, did not have a TV.
True.
But if he played him and the band played a certain fiddle tune, that meant that she needed to get in the kitchen and start cooking because we're coming home and we'll be home at supper time.
That's funny. That's a great story.
That's how they would communicate.
That was before telephones really were, you know, so that's great.
Yeah, so I always thought that was...
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating there.
Yeah.
Well, did that lead you into, at some point, have you recorded artists that are in the Piedmont or old?
Yeah, I mean, I've recorded, I made a record with this band called the Stanley County Boys, an old-time record. I love old-time music, and some of that stuff that Martin Stevenson, the record I made with Martin, had a lot of old-time musicians. It actually had Charlie Poole.
Yes.
Charlie Poole and Kenny Rohr's great nephews.
Oh, that's cool.
So I just love, I love old-time and Piedmont, and to me it just, I mean, I grew up sort of in a hotbed of that.
Yeah, you did. Okay, now, so the management part, did you do that after?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, musicians need help.
They do. That's where I was going.
So that's kind of how that's all started. And, you know, I just started just managing artists. I mean,
they definitely, the artists need managing. There's no doubt about that.
And so, you know, we're probably now, my company is more 70% management, 30% record label.
Yeah.
I just love putting records out, and I love that aspect of what we do. It's not really a money maker. I'll give you a sobering reality of the music business in 2020. So, you know, most people now are streaming.
Yes.
So it takes 1,500 streams of a full record to equal one download or one purchase of a record.
Right.
So, you know, that's the reality of where we're at. So a lot of times when I put records out, you know, it's not a money-making thing. There's a lot of labor of love that goes into it. We've got a new David Childers record that I'm really proud of because we recorded it in my living room with a pair of stereo mics, and with the band playing around him. Sometimes it's just David and the guitar. And David, for about 9 months, would come over almost once a week. And at like 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock or 2, we would record all onto reel-to-reel tape.
Yeah, I've seen the video. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I don't. To me, that
It's one of his best works. I'll just be careful with you. I mean,
it's to me, it's been a big labor of love. David and I took so much pride in making that, and it's the sound quality. It's a lightning in the bottle approach where you get it or you don't get it.
You got a lot of it. I can tell you. I mean, I've listened to it, and it is.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. What it really does, it shows off David's talent as a songwriter and performer. I mean,
he's excellent at both.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, he is one of the. I've known David for a long time too, and he is one of the finest songwriters in America. But he's definitely one of the songwriting treasures in North Carolina.
For sure. And I believe David when he sings. He's got a conviction about it.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
So, but I'm really proud of that one. But yeah, I mean, you know, we're continuing to. I mean, we're learning. I mean, I also have a saying where if somebody doesn't call you crazy at least once a week, you're not doing your job in the music business. So, I mean, we're trying. I think growing up in the Piedmont and seeing NASCAR promoters and professional wrestling promoters. I know that sounds like a weird thing, but to me, they would make like Humpy Wheeler at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. To kids growing up near the Spirit, I grew up about 6 miles from there. He made that like Disney World meets the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he did.
Because Richard Petty and David Pearson and all those, when I was a kid, those guys were like heroes.
Larger than life.
Larger than life.
Yeah.
Now, around America, not everybody. I remember I was at the beach once and I met a kid. I was around 12 years old. I met a kid from Wisconsin. And I asked him, "Who's your driver?" Well, he didn't know what that meant. And he asked me, "What do you mean?"
Oh, that's so funny.
He's like, "My mom and dad drove us down here." I said, No. Who's your? I'm a David Pearson fan. Like, Neil Bonnet fan. Who's your driver?
Junior Johnson myself.
Yeah. And he was, he didn't even know who Richard Petty was.
Oh.
So that sort of, I realized then that, you know, that was a regional, that was bigger than regional, but still, those guys were heroes to me. And then that, pro wrestling.
They did the same thing. The Crockett's did the same thing. I saw it with.
No doubt. I mean, it was a larger than life.
It was.
Thing. And half the people would know it's fake, half didn't. There was some.
Well, it's like my version of a story. It doesn't necessarily have to be true as long as it's a good story.
That's right.
I mean, it's the entertainment value of it.
That's right.
I use a hamburger. A piece of meat and two pieces of bread is a great little deal. It's how you embellish it that makes it really wonderful, you know?
Yeah.
And they were good at that. I mean, they were really good.
I really, and I had the honor of meeting Humpy Wheeler for the first time. Well, I met him briefly, actually, at a show by a band called Mountain Heart.
Yeah,
That was maybe 15 years ago. I met Humpy for about 15, 20 seconds. I was almost too nervous to talk to him. And then I just had lunch with him last week.
Oh, that's great.
And that was, to me, Humpy's one of the greatest, if not the greatest promoter to walk this planet. And you can almost trace the decline of NASCAR since Humpy has gotten out of the sport.
I totally agree.
And the Crockett's, in 1986, sold about 400,000 tickets just in the state of North Carolina with pro wrestling. Being in Charlotte once a week, Greensboro once a week, Fayetteville, Asheville. Really amazing business that they had going on in the Southeast. So I was just really fortunate to grow up around two of the greatest promoters. That had a big impact on, I mean, again, then Arthur Smith and Tommy Shell. You had that, I mean, they had a daily show on WBT. They were really big stars here in the Piedmont and state of North Carolina, South Carolina. That had a big influence. And see, Arthur just stayed in North Carolina. He didn't go. So that had a big influence on me. So I guess, I don't know, a lot of that, I was fortunate to grow up in such a great area.
Were you in the Kilgo era too, the Kilgo Canteen?
No, that was a little bit before my time.
Kilgo's kind of had the early version of the Tommy Fail, Arthur Smith deal, going for a teenage crowd, for a younger crowd.
Yeah, that was before my time. But, you know, WBT, also WBT radio, the talent in Charlotte, North Carolina, as far as radio and television.
Oh, that's been great. Oh, it really has.
You're looking at a market that's, at times, especially before the Hornets and before the Panthers, was probably about a 40th to 50th marketplace in the United States. Now we're higher than that. But the actual talent for TV and radio was probably top 5 in the nation.
I agree.
And people would get here and they realized that, and they would stay here for the longest time.
I mean, the Jay Thomases, the John Boys and Billies,
That's right.
I mean, that
Larry
was big.
Larry Sprinkle was one hell of a talent.
He is a very talented guy.
Jack Daniel, who's involved at WROQ, then WEND, now he's at WSOC. Great talent. I was a big Rock and Ray fan.
Oh yeah, Rock and Ray.
Growing up. So yeah, I was fortunate also to have WBT and WBTV in my backyard.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good area to be from. I mean, no doubt. There's a lot of talent in strange ways there. I mean, you know.
For sure.
Okay, so how does Humpy Wheeler and music fit together?
Yeah, so in 1980, you know, Waylon, Willie, and the Boys were pretty popular.
Yes, they were.
I mean, they had the big Outlaw record that had come out a couple years prior, and Waylon, you know, I guess Waylon and Willie both were two of the biggest, if not biggest, country acts on the planet.
Yeah.
So Waylon comes and plays the qualifying NASCAR for, and I still call it the World 600.
Right, yeah, the World 600.
The race in May at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Humpy Wheeler, I think qualifying used to be on a Wednesday night. He would always have entertainment. So, you know, I saw Bernard Taylor, who was a boxer from Charlotte. I saw him fight 2 years in a row over there. they would, after qualifying would end, they'd set up a boxing ring and he would fight.
Oh, yeah.
Well, 1980, it was Waylon Jennings. And if you recall, Waylon and Willie had a little bit of a biker kind of following.
They did.
And when you mix bikers and cotton mill workers and alcohol together, I was, I guess, 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, probably the scariest moment of my life. So what transpired is Waylon performed in the infield. So when you think about a racetrack, think about the Charlotte Motor Speedway, where the cars come into the pits, pit road, they put a stage right there, right after the qualifying.
Okay.
And there's about 40,000 people there.
In the infield, too?
No,
Oh.
just in the stands.
Oh, okay.
This is where the problem arises.
Oh, okay.
So the infield was only for the drivers, and I'm not sure, media, I don't know, it was maybe 100 people.
Okay.
Well, the people in the stands were jealous of the people in the infield. And again, it's only about 100 people. And there's 40,000 people sitting in the stands.
Right.
And a racetrack is a big
It is big.
property.
Yeah.
So the Crickets, Buddy Holly's Crickets,
Yeah.
they were the opening band. So they started first. Well, people got restless. Now, I'm a massive Buddy Holly. I'm a bigger Buddy Holly fan than I am a Waylon Jennings fan. So I was, as a kid, Gary Busey in 78 or so.
Yeah.
He did the best acting role he ever did, and that was the Buddy Holly story. So I was a Buddy Holly fanatic. But people got restless, and what they started doing, and I think this NASCAR, this made the rule that you couldn't bring, and this is shocking that at one time you could bring glass bottles.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah. Into NASCAR.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. Really.
So this really changed the rule, because what transpired is while the Crickets were playing, people got restless, started throwing bottles, because people were trying to climb the fence
Right.
to get into the infield.
That had been.
Now, not only that, but there were fights breaking out left and right. And people also don't realize how big how tall a NASCAR fence is.
True.
And once you get to the top of the fence, you've got to somehow, it's at an angle to where it's not the easiest thing to then swing your body around it and climb the
True,
So
yes.
people were falling.
Oh, no.
Then the people that got over didn't realize that the track is at an angle.
Yeah, no.
And as soon as they got landed on the ground, they wanted to run because Cabarrus County Sheriff Department and all these highway patrolmen, all these people were out trying to detain the people that were making it over the fence. So as soon as people landed, they would start running and fall flat on their face. Plus they had been drinking.
Yeah, oh Lord.
So it was a full, I talked to Humpy Wheeler about it. It was a full riot.
I'm sure it was.
That was kept very quiet. How that did not get, how it was not more of a big story nationally, I'm not sure.
I guess that's the power of Humpy.
Yeah, and I remember the Crickets, one of them saying, okay, if y'all don't stop throwing bottles and climbing the fence, Waylon's not going to come out. Well,
Oh, yeah, that was the wrong thing.
that was even more people started doing it. And I would be willing to bet 10,000 bottles were thrown.
And all of them breaking because they're all hitting the. Yeah.
They're going over the fence.
Yeah.
But I saw a knife fight.
Oh, Lord.
I'm a little kid.
Yeah.
It was
Terrifying, I guess.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
Um,
Did Waylon wind up playing?
oh, he did play. Now, We left, I don't know if it was after 5 songs because it was so wild.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was, and again, even when he's playing, people are still, because they can't get close to him.
Right.
And he's the biggest country star in the world.
At the time, yeah.
And you're 10 football fields away from him. I mean, it sounded on paper like it was a great idea, but then when you mix, and then you well know, being from this area, cotton mill towns, the clientele and the people in cotton mill towns, they're not pushovers.
No, they're not. No,
and,
they're not.
You got to be careful when you go to a Walmart today in Cabarrus County. I'm sure in Gaston County.
I'm sure.
You can't look at somebody the wrong way. You're going to get in a fight.
Sure.
But it was. That was a very. I did see. That's the only time I saw Waylon Jennings. So
that's an interesting way to see
yes,
him too.
I can, in my mind, I can still.
Altamont, the North Carolina version of that, I guess.
Yes, so kind of funny, but yeah, that was one of my. And I remember another thing, in like '76 maybe, Donna Fargo was the Grand Marshal
of the race.
So what they would always do, Humpy would always get someone as the Grand Marshal of the race, and they'd put them in the back of a Cadillac, and they'd ride them around the track. And I remember Donna Fargo. Now she's from North Carolina.
Yeah, she is.
And she had like Funny Face was a big hit, and I'm the happiest girl in the whole USA. Then Willie one year was the Grand Marshal, even though he didn't play, to my knowledge, he didn't play. He just was Grand Marshal. Then Telly Savalas.
Oh, Telly, yeah.
Earl Campbell.
Earl Campbell, that's a strange one too.
Yeah. I just remember those off there. But then, I mean, Humpy would, again, larger than life, he was trying to make, and then I was there when Janet Guthrie raced.
Oh, really?
For the first time. And that was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
And I remember that was a really big deal, really, for women's sports.
I agree, it was.
And to me, again, I don't mean to harp on this mill town, but about every single woman I knew in my family, like, was a hard working person.
Right.
And I mean, I was like, I mean, it was a big deal, but I also felt like, it wasn't that big of a deal to me, because my grandmother slaved away in a cotton mill for 45 years, and it was awesome for Janet Guthrie, but it was also one of the heroes of my life has been my grandmother, who was a hard
always a slap in the face there. I mean, to a degree, although it's a liberating and a slap in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah. So, but I remember seeing her race I saw Marty Robbins race. You know, Marty was essentially riding around instead of racing, but I did see him race over at the Speedway.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, but I'm a big Marty Robbins fan.
Oh, let's take it one more notch.
Yeah.
Who hooked David up with Kyle Petty? I've seen that they've done some shows.
Yes. So I've got to know Kyle. Kyle Petty's such a nice fellow, talented in so many ways, and Kyle also is like, how can I get better? What can I do to improve? And I said, well, I want you to go see David Shores.
Right.
So he went over to David's house a couple times, and David would help him with songs, and Kyle would show him songs, and but that's been a cool thing to see.
Yeah, that's a NASCAR music connection too.
Yeah, super nice. Kyle's such a great guy, and
my favorite Kyle story is he did the drunk driving at school. You know, they got him legally drunk, He drove through the pylons and never missed a thing. You know? he got out and he apologized. He said, you know, I guess that genetically I'm probably not the right person to do this, you know.
No, that's funny.
So, you know, that's but okay, how many acts do you have at this moment?
So management-wise, I've got the Avett Brothers, David Childers, Amethyst Kia, who was nominated for a Grammy for Best Roots Song just a few weeks ago. She did not win. Kind of felt bad about that. I really wish she would have won. I felt like she was deserving to win. Then we have Sierra Farrell. We've got a band called Bombadil. We've got a band called the Ruin Brothers and a band called the National Reserve. Sierra Farrell's on Rounder Records. She's actually today in the studio working on her debut record.
Oh, that's good.
You know, David's got a new record out. The Ruin Brothers, we have a new record coming out by the Ruin Brothers. Samantha Crane, I'm not managing Samantha anymore, but we have a new album with Samantha coming out May 1st. Scott Avett produced a new album by an artist named Eve Barzilay, and he goes under the name Clem Snide. That comes out soon. Bombadil's got a new record. So we're really, really, really busy. It's good to be busy.
Are you maxed out? I mean,
well, yeah, I think so. We would really kind of have to hire another person. I've got 4 employees, and I would have to hire another person, I think, to take on. It just comes down to man and woman power.
Yeah. Do you look new acts or?
Well, yeah, you know, it just has to kind of, like Sierra Farrell, for example. I don't know if this was, I guess, I'm trying to think, we're in February, so I guess it might have been in May or June of this past year. We're riding down the road, I'm driving, I've got my family, I've got a 19-year-old son and a 16-year-old son, and so we're riding, a 17-year-old son now, we're riding down the road, and my son, he's always wanting to have control of the radio and what we play.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I'm a little bit like that myself. But he's playing something, he plays me this song, and it's like, whoa, what is this? Who is this?
Right.
And it was Sierra Farrell singing this song called In Dreams. And if you've never seen it, go on YouTube and just search it.
I will.
It'll make the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
All right.
It's that powerful. Well, immediately that night, I tried to locate her. Got to find who this is. I got to work with her. So I found a Bandcamp address. I reach out. Then I find her on Facebook. I reach out. And that all came about because my son played that song.
Wow, that's pretty good stuff too.
So, yeah, my kids I've always played music for them because if it connects with them.
True.
It sort of,
and
this was when they were 3 and 5 years old.
Right.
I mean, if I could see my son, I'll never forget, we were in, the Avetts played an event near Raleigh, and we had put a record out called Mignonette. Mm-hmm. And on that record they had a song called At the Beach. Well, I had played that non-stop in my car, in my house, the whole record, right, before it had come out. So my son, he might have been 5'4", he's in his car seat in the back. We finished this event in Clayton, North Carolina with the Avetts. We're going home. And just by chance, this nationally syndicated radio show with David Dye, he's no longer the host, but it's called the World Cafe. Sure. David Dye on there says, and here's the Avett Brothers at the beach. Now, we had not pulled out of the parking lot. I look back, and my son had realized that someone over the radio was playing
That song.
that song.
Yeah.
I'll never forget
That
it.
is
He
pretty
was
cool.
so excited.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm sure he
So,
was.
yeah, I mean, he realized that it wasn't just me pressing play.
Right.
That was an awesome moment.
Yeah,
Well,
that's pretty-
and then here 14 years later, he tells me about
Yeah, that's great.
Sheriff Farrell. So, but yeah, so I don't know, it always kind of happens organically the best way. I mean, you know, David Childers and my mother telling me about the Avetts.
Do people hammer you for, I mean, are you always getting,
Yeah,
hey, will you listen to
am,
this?
and a lot of times, you know, it's either not my cup of tea or it's not my form of music I'm really into, and I'm honest with them. And if I can help them, I'll tell them to go, you know,
Right.
hey, this person specializes in that. And then sometimes I want to work with it, but I don't have enough time in the day to make it happen. So it's one of those things where it just sort of, again, organically kind of.
Is it still fun for you?
Always, yeah.
I mean, it hasn't grown
Yeah.
to be so much
No,
work.
I mean, I'm, you know, I get off on music. I mean, it's the greatest thing. I mean, I wake up thinking about music, go to sleep thinking about music.
That's good.
You know, so I'm the person that, you know, if there's a good song on the radio, I drive around the neighborhood before I pull into my driveway
Yeah, I
to
kinda
let
do
the
the
song
same
in,
too,
you know,
yeah.
kind of one of those things. But yeah, it's still fun. I mean, it's work.
Sure.
But I mean, I've been really fortunate to make my passion my livelihood. So
Yeah.
I don't take it for granted either, and I work hard. And it sure beats working in a cotton mill.
It does.
And I'm so thankful and fortunate. I know we had a Thanksgiving dinner, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. We all went around the room what we were thankful for, and I said I'm thankful that my grandfather slaved away over 50 years working in a cotton mill. And you know, my grandfather, my grandpa Ramseur, he started when he was like 13 years old working in a cotton mill full time.
Yeah, my dad did too.
Yeah, so when my sons would complain about taking the trash down to the end of the road, I would always say, you know, you'd be working full time in a cotton mill. So that's nothing to take lightly. So I'm so fortunate, and music has given me so much joy, and I've got to do so many great things, and my kids have got to experience so much art.
Will they follow you into the business?
Well, you know, my son, my oldest son's at NC State.
I have a
Excuse me.
grandson there too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So my son, he's in music there, and he's in a band. His band's called the Outside Cats, and he's a good guitar player. He really works at him. He plays every day.
Right.
Then my youngest, I think he's wanting to go to film school, and he plays cello. So I just don't know. We shall see. I just want them to do something that they love doing, and I want them to be happy.
That's good. That's all you can ask.
Yeah,
for.
that's right. And I have kind of worried about how are they going to land on their feet, and what are they going to do, but you know, it's one of those things where you got to take a leap of faith.
You do.
And the Avetts did it, and I did it. And
Sure.
you sometimes just got to jump without a safety net and work hard. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's still, the American dream is still alive and well. I can tell you that.
I love it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on today.
Well, you're a very busy person, and I appreciate you coming and doing this. It's a great story, and I'm glad to meet you.
Well, same here.
All right.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
One, two, three, four. Streets of Nashville are haunted by dreams that died in the gutter, never were seen. Was anything more You hit the closed door. Same sorry answers you've heard before. The eyes that don't see you, the expression so bored. They say you're not, no you're not, no you're not what we're looking for. You're just not what we're looking for. Yeah, you got something, but you need a little something more.